Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. The topics discussed in this podcast will reflect my opinions and are not in any way to be regarded as medical advice. 100. We've hit the ton, as they sometimes say in cricket parlance. I was never that much good at cricket at school, so I won't wave my bat. This is episode 100 of Dr Joe Unplugged, and two things. One, I want to thank all of you who have listened, watched, supported, commented, been involved in any way over the last roughly 15, 16 months that we've been running the podcast. And number two, I thought it would be timely just to do a little bit of a retrospective over perhaps some of the bigger issues that we've touched upon. And no, this is not going to go for hours. We'll keep it fairly brief to the highlights. The issues, in my view, and partly in response to feedback as well, that has interested people the most. And look, obviously you all out there will have your own sort of views as to what interests you the most, and that's good. We all have different opinions. But certainly vaping and tobacco policy in Australia has been one that's generated a lot of interest. Interestingly, just in the last month, in the last couple of weeks, in fact, the New South Wales government has looked at how many police is it going to take to try and enforce the tobacco excise laws in terms of keeping black market cigarettes out of New South Wales. And apparently they have 20 compliance officers for 20,000 stores in New South Wales. I wouldn't be surprised if the percentage numbers are, I'd be surprised they're not dissimilar in other states. And I'll quote here, as always, we'll put the link in the description below. Mr Minns, that's the Premier of New South Wales, for those of you outside Australia, said he wanted New South Wales health officials running hospitals, not conducting criminal investigations, and police would have to decide whether they would allocate police to tobacco at the expense of every other crime in New South Wales. And one of the suggestions was that the police might have to pull officers from the domestic violence squad to the tobacco squad. Now, violence of any description is a major issue, and that is exactly where we want police. They should be involved in sorting out violent crimes and look in an ideal world, a bit like we used to live in, doing what they can to prevent it. It can't always be prevented. Don't get me wrong. It's like they can't be monitoring everybody every second. We don't want that. We don't want a surveillance state. But look, in the old days, police on the beat, their presence probably did act as a deterrent. Don't see as much of that anymore. I think it's a bit of a problem. But serious crime that threatens risk of injury or worse to people is a role for police, a very legitimate role. There are other roles for police, I'm not saying it's the only one. But this whole problem with illegal tobacco has been brought about by government. And there is the beginnings, and for those of you familiar with me before the podcast, I've been involved in this space for a number of years. And a lot of people have been saying for many years that the increases in tobacco excise are going to reach a point of being counterproductive, and we've reached that point and gone beyond it. So a number of commentators who've been cheerleaders for the failed policies of the government are now actually saying, well, maybe this is not working. One of the obvious reasons that it's not working is the federal government is expected to earn $7.4 billion in revenue from tobacco excise in the 24-25 financial year, down from $16.3 billion in 29-20 and $12.6 billion in 22-23. Now, smoking rates have been falling, but they have not been falling by anywhere near that much. And when you factor in that the excise has gone up, what this tells you is that the federal tax excise take is a function of people buying tobacco and cigarettes on the black market, where they don't pay any excise. I think back in around about 2012-13, the tax take was also something 12-13 billion. So it's nearly halved, despite massive increases in actual excise amounts. So the percentage has gone up. Smoking rates haven't halved. in the last 10 or 12 years or so. So there's a total failure of policy, total failure of policy. And then the solution is, well, we'll try and enforce it. So, yeah, we'll send 20 officers out for 20,000 shops. And by the way, their time could be much better utilised. So this is a total and abject failure of government policy. And to the credit of the New South Wales Premier, he is actually calling it out because excise is a federal, not a state matter. Policing is a state, not a federal matter. And look, there's always issues across these sort of jurisdictional matters when there's just, arguably too many laws and different ways of trying to enforce it, and nobody is ever really in charge. Through all of this, it would be relatively simple if more was done to help people stop smoking, and you know my position on this. So those of you not listened before, welcome if this is your first episode. Australia just needs to follow the rest of the free world and make vaping as easy to access as smoking. You go to New Zealand, it is no more difficult to buy the at least 95% less harmful alternative, which is e-cigarettes or vaping. And that 95% figure is not mine. It is the figure of the UK government and the New Zealand government and others. It's work been done multiple times. It's not for people who don't smoke. It is not for teenagers. It's not to be advertised. New Zealand has figured this out. The UK has figured it out. Other countries have figured it out. Australia's got its head in the sand. And the end result is A, smoking rates are not falling. B, obviously it's harder for people to give up smoking by the world's most popular and effective method. And C, the government is actually shooting itself in the foot by taking in less money. And let's be honest, that's their primary interest. They're interested in the money. So whether this will sharpen their minds, well, look, we'll find out. So that's been a big one. Dietary guidelines, and we spoke about that just in the last few weeks, the failure of the food pyramid and South Park's idea about turning it upside down. Very, very positively, RFK Jr. as the new Health and Human Services Secretary has already taken some steps through his various allies to ban some food additives in the United States that have already been banned in Europe. I mean, it's extraordinary to think that it's safe to eat in one country and not in another. And when I get back to safe, no, it doesn't kill you immediately, but it's not good for you. And why do you want it in your food chain? Just in the last few days, in fact, in June, RFKJ has sacked the Advisory Committee on Immunisation Practices, which of course has attracted a huge amount of screaming and outrage, but almost everybody, as I'm given to understand, who was on that panel, or at least a significant number, had massive financial interests in vaccines. Now, it's good that people have financial interests in vaccines, and developers need to get rewarded and companies that make them need to get return for their investment, but these people should not be involved in making decisions about what is approved and what is not approved. You can't be the umpire and play the game. But, all the usual suspects screaming blue murder. And when you look at, and we'll put the link in the description, you look at some of the people who've been appointed, Dr. Robert Malone, one of the pioneers of mRNA technology, who subsequently became quite opposed to its widespread use because he probably knew more about it than most. Martin Kulldorff, one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. Again, these are genuine scientists. People who will actually look at real evidence. Is it there or is it not there, and make impartial decisions. We know the appointment of Vinay Prasad as the lead vaccine overlord, if you like, or seer in the United States. And Vinay is brilliant. Follow him on Substack. I've said that before. He is a stickler for actual evidence. Don't tell me this works. Show me the evidence that it works. And if you can't, then I'm not going to accept that it works. He was calling for, shock horror, trials or studies on masks. Nobody wanted to do it. Why didn't they want to do it? Because they knew they didn't make any difference. And that's not good enough for somebody like Vinay Prasad, and it shouldn't be good enough for any of us. Obviously, Marty Makary is head of the CDC. Aseem Malhotra, a doctor, cardiologist from the UK. I've had the good pleasure to meet personally a few times. He doesn't have an official role, probably because he's a UK, not a US citizen, but he does have an advisory role, and that's really good. So if you look at the team, and obviously with Jay Bhattacharya as the head of the head of the NIH, again, has stated very clearly, we want good science and we want it reproducible. So if you do a study and you can't verify it, it's not much use. And that's going to be the subject of a whole additional podcast that will be dropping in the next few weeks or so. So the failed dietary guidelines are, yes, real science. And the other one that I just want to touch on briefly, and we've spoken about this before, is just garbage studies. And the latest one is apparently climate change threatens eye health. If the average temperature, and this was a study in China, hello, that if the temperature was 28 degrees, there was a 16% higher likelihood of conjunctivitis to a temperature of 10.7 degrees. Well, that suggests to me that you might be more likely to get conjunctivitis if you live in Hawaii or Singapore than if you live in Germany or Scandinavia. Big deal. So yes, maybe some conditions are more common in warmer weather than colder weather. I think that's nothing new. It doesn't mean that if the temperature is point something of a degree higher in 50, 80 or 100 years that everybody's going to go blind. But I mean, seriously? They're doing a study looking at rates of conjunctivitis, which is a really quite, not pleasant, but very benign condition, which is very, very easily treated, and saying there's a 16% difference if the temperature varies threefold? Really? Somebody's paid them to do this? Oh, well. Hopefully, and particularly with Jay Bhattacharya in charge of the NIH, less of this sort of garbage research will be getting done. We'll wait and see. But, if the Chinese want to do it, look, good luck to them. So to wrap up today, look, thank you to everybody who's watched, listened, downloaded, commented, been involved in any way. Necessarily, I've got to thank the team at Podwave Studios. The entire team have been brilliant in helping me put this together and get it out every week. I'm no techo. It's not going to happen by me alone. So very, very grateful to Ben and Ray and the entire team at Podwaves. And cheers to the next 100 episodes of Dr. Joe Unplugged. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If there are topics you'd like to see covered, be in touch through the chat or email info@drjoe.net.au. We'll be uploading new content each Monday, and soon we'll be putting these videos out on X. You can follow me there at Dr. Joe's DIY Health.